Hey everyone, I'm Jay Scotto, a solutions consultant at Copy.ai, and in this video, we'll be walking you through the scrape action. So manually reviewing websites, copying and pasting content into a workflow or anywhere else is a really boring and tedious task. Using the scrape action in a workflow, we'll cover how you can automate retrieval of the page content given any URL. And so if you have a public URL that allows for web scraping, you can actually use your Copy.ai workflow to scrape that URL for the content on that page for any downstream transformation or new content generation or whatever your needs might be. So just as a short example, I have a workflow here that takes in some input, which is a URL. It adds an action to scrape that URL and then summarizes the scraped content. Inside of the scrape action, you have a number of different parameters. So the first, obviously, being the URL that you'll use. Commonly, this is found from an input in a workflow, but you can also run a search action, extract a URL, and then scrape the URL that is extracted from your search results. Next, you have the quality parameter, and there are several options here. You have Ultra, Default, and Premium, and this is generally for the quality of scraping that you might need. So we default to Ultra to tackle harder to scrape sites immediately on your behalf. So you can certainly experiment with the setting to understand how this option might affect the returned output, but for now, we'll keep it set to Ultra. And then the output type. You have text only if you just need the content that's on the site, or HTML as another option if you're looking for alt text or anything like that. So how would we build this workflow in practice? So I can say, given a URL, scrape the URL, and then summarize the content. And we'll hit run. And the workflow builder behind the scenes will take the simple instructions that we've given it, and it will compile a set of easy to follow steps for the AI to complete. We'll give it a little bit to generate here. Awesome. Now that our workflow is done generating, what we can do is give it a quick test. So I'll click the test workflow button. We have a blog URL here from Copy.ai highlighting the difference between large language models. And so coming back into the tab here, I will paste that URL and I'll run a workflow test. So now what the workflow is doing is running through those repeatable steps you see on the screen. So first it will scrape the URL with the settings that we supplied. So we only wanted the text content and we wanted the quality to be ultra. Given that quality, the scraper will go ahead and scrape that blog post that I provided. And then the next action will summarize that content that was scraped from our scraper. Awesome. So it looks like the scrape has finished. And as we can see here, we get quite a lot of data from that blog post that contains all of the blog post content. And then what we see here is a summary output of the article content, talking about how it compares different AI language models like Claude, GPT 3.5, and GPT 4, analyzing their strengths and also limitations. Now, how do we use this in practice? Going to another workflow here, let's say that you run a blog and that blog is launching in different markets that are regionally around the world. You'll need to translate those articles that you have in your blog already to different languages so you can launch in that market. So what we'll first do is for every blog URL, for every article that you have, we'll scrape that blog, we'll rewrite it, and then we'll translate it to German, Polish, and Spanish. Of course, you can slot in any other language you might need, but for now, we'll stick with these three. So I will run to test workflow. I will paste the same blog URL from before, and I'll run a workflow test. Awesome. So now that our test workflow has finished between that same blog article earlier, what we can see here is that our scraper is outputting the same content of the blog article we saw earlier from the Copy.ai difference between LLM's blog article. And now what we've done is we've rewritten that blog in English, but in a different format. And now we can translate that to all of the languages that we need to rewrite that blog in to launch in different markets. So we can translate it to German, and there's the output for German. We can translate it to Polish. There's the output for Polish. And then there's the translation to Spanish output you can see at the bottom here. Of course, these are not the only languages you can translate to. These are just some that I've used in this example here. So how else can you use the scrape action? You can use the scrape action in a number of ways. If you want to scrape a LinkedIn profile to learn more about a prospect if you're in sales, and then you can update the contact in Salesforce. You could scrape a product page and extract key selling points, or scrape a blog post, translate it to different languages like we've done here. And that's about how to use the scrape action.